dirt or tarmac?
Dirt, always dirt. For me, desert racing is kind of the pinnacle of all the different forms of racing. So we end up doing these races like a Baja 500. We'll do 8 hours of in the dust.
Yeah.
Like we are fighting tooth and nail. I forget how long my section was, 8 hours or 400 miles, something like that. I sprinted the whole way. We're ramming through ditches and you're trying to just blitz through rocks and try to not get flat tires. And the desert kind of checks everyone. It's you got to beat the desert first. So if you do cheat, it's not necessarily meaning you're going to win.
When your dad was competing, he didn't have to worry about any of this stuff, right?
No. We call it stinking it up. Desert racing in general is still Wild West and it's still like open.
Yeah.
There aren't these rules. There's no cost caps. I seem to gravitate towards female co-drivers, which I don't know if it's just because I like being told what to do or what. She was quick to yell at me not to get out. 5 seconds later, it's like, wham, somebody hits us.
Hey everyone, today on The Creative Drive, we're joined by someone who grew up with racing in his DNA, literally. The son of Pikes Peak legend Rod Millen and brother to rally stunt and drift icon Rhys Millen. Ryan Millen has carved out his own name in the dirt as well. From winning stages in the American Rally Association to pushing trophy trucks off-road, Ryan blends old school with new gen vision. He's also got a sharp eye for storytelling, brand building, and where the sport is headed. Today we go deep into his journey from Millen family legacy to modern motorsports creative. Let's get into it. All right. Ryan Millen, welcome to The Creative Drive.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Ryan Millen, you've got one of the most iconic last names in motorsports, in American motorsports, and world motorsports. When did you realize that it's a special name?
Oh, I don't know. Growing up with a dad like Rod and Uncle Steve, my brother Rhys, you just kind of thought it was normal.
Right.
I went to Mickey Thompson races as a kid. I rode with my dad at Pikes Peak in practice days and some of the Hyundai cars. And, it wasn't exemplary, let's say. It was just kind of normal. You grew up that way. I played baseball and I raced go-karts. And it was kind of one of those things that I look back on it and it was a really awesome childhood.
So were you born in the U.S.?
Yes, I was born in the U.S.
So you're born in, so that's by no accent.
Yeah, Rhys was born in New Zealand, and I'm first generation of our family to be born in the U.S.
And so how did your motorsport start? So you did go-karts. Okay.
Yeah, so my motorsports kind of began on my own choosing. To a small degree. My dad introduced me to dirt bikes when I was 5 and 6. I got my first PW50, and I would race at the Mickey Thompson Stadium events in the Pee Wee class, basically. And, go-karts and that sort of stuff didn't come along until my teenage years when I wanted to, which, in some regards, a lot of people told me I was too late, which was an interesting thing to be told as a teenager.
Yeah.
Which I think was the writing was on the wall for road racing. You were later in the years, but for the path that I ended up choosing, which was rallying and off-road racing, it really was there's no rush for that sport.
This is Racer, your all-access pass to the best in motorsports, performance, and car culture. Get Racer Plus for live races, extended highlights, breaking news, and fan-favorite build and enthusiast shows, all in one place. From Formula Drift to off-road mayhem.
A full-blown nail-biter.
Supercars to grassroots brawls, garages to rare collectors. Stream it all, anytime, anywhere. This is about machines and the people who move the culture forward. And when the screen fades, the story continues in Racer Magazine, a collectible trusted by champions, creators, and connoisseurs. Every page, a deeper dive into the soul of speed and performance. Racer Plus and Racer Magazine, the ultimate bundle. Built for the obsessed, powered by passion.
And what led you to, rallying, though? You were going on this path of road racing, right? Did you want to eventually become a Formula One racer or something?
Yeah, that was the vision in my teenage years, because that was the easy access. It was easy to go-kart racing and in Southern California, there were 6 tracks sort of thing. So it was easy to do that. It was cost effective. And, you know, I wanted to be a little different than my dad and my brother and my family. You know, I wanted to try that road racing stuff because I thought that would be the most fun, but it turns out I only did well when it got wet. So I would.
It's maybe in your blood.
Yes. Yeah. So that was kind of something I fought for a while, and I started, you know, doing better in the wet, and then races would dry up, and I would struggle, and I kept pushing and I kept trying. I got into Barber Dodge Pro Series, and those were downforce cars, and you know, I look back on it now, and where I failed in that area is I didn't have a sense for aerodynamics. I have a sense for the tire. I can feel the tire. So that's hugely helpful in rallying or off-road. You need to have a really intimate relationship with your tire, especially off-road, because you can flat them. Yeah. And I have to look back on every race, and I can tell you in those little spots where I nicked a sidewall. And I think that's important. And that's our races in off-road are won and lost on a flat tire now. Yeah. You know, it's so rare we get them in some of these races, and you know, it's part of that sport.
So when you're growing up, your dad's doing this off-road stuff, and your brother is doing off-road and getting into drifting and things like that. At which timing were you thinking, okay, maybe I should go to rally?
Well, I ended up getting, what was it? It would have been, I think I was 18 or 19, and I tried out for Red Bull's junior team to go to Europe, and I didn't get picked. Scott Speed went, Colin Fleming, I forget who else went. And I got asked to do Baja 1000 with my dad. He'd done the Baja 2000 the year before with Rhys, and Rhys was his co-driver. And he got asked to do it with a company called Centrix Financial, and they were doing a father-son deal. And so I was supposed to ride with my dad, and it ended up turning into I got to drive with the son team. And that just opened up a world of adventure and exploration for me. I mean, it was just life-changing. And to go sit at a racetrack just did not like feed my soul anymore. It was about going over mountain ranges and racing on beaches and trying to get through silt washes and rock crawling and all that stuff. So it hook, line, and sinkered me. That was 2003 Baja 1000.
And was it immediate? Did you know that was your deal now?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. That was like, it was so easy to close the chapter on road racing. I think it set me up with a lot of fundamentals that really has helped my off-road racing. It taught me some racecraft more than anything. It taught me how to be clean. It really taught me speed and how to feel speed. And that I've transferred over to desert racing, which for me, desert racing is kind of the pinnacle of all the different forms of racing, because we do have, you know, wheel-to-wheel racing. It's a little more challenging with the dust, but it does happen. We have to do pace notes like rallying, and then we have to worry about up and down instead of just X, Y, and Z. The vehicles do jump. How much do they jump in ditches, and then managing equipment. And it's become one of the more challenging forms of motorsports that I've been involved with.
What part of it is the most challenging?
Oh, it's a little bit more of like a chess game in a weird way. We have the dust factor is our biggest thing that we have to deal with. You know, we have cars, we're released every 30 seconds to a minute, and basically we can get within 20 seconds of each other at the speeds we're going. And then it's like you're waiting for a mistake, or you're waiting for a flat tire, or you're waiting for them to catch another vehicle. So then we'll get two sets of vehicles dust, and just not, the racetracks are not difficult per se to drive, but they're really difficult to drive when you can't see.
Has Rhys coached you in any of your endeavors here?
Or? You know, I think he kind of came into desert racing similar time-ish as me, but I think I went more on the trophy trucks a couple years before him. So we kind of bounced both of our knowledges back and forth. He makes some wonderful UTVs and like class 1 cars and buggies and that sort of stuff. And I've kind of focused on the big trucks, and that's been kind of my passion and learning how to make those things work.
When he was getting into drifting, what did you think of that?
Oh man, I would have been. So we have a 12-year gap. So I don't know exactly the years he was getting into it.
It was like 2005, right?
Yeah,
6 around that.
So yeah, I would have been in the road racing days, and you know, it was interesting to see how the passion and the companies that flooded to it, and it was cool to see something form. Right. You know, the traditional motorsports were already formed, and to see drifting grow and build was pretty exciting.
Because your dad competed too a little bit.
Yeah, he did. And I got to try one of his Mazda RX-8s. I went out on one of those Formula drifting days, and that was interesting to me. But I think I had a little bit more of a racer mentality. So to me, I wasn't so much show and I'm more focused on the go. So it kind of confused me at the time because I was like, well, the judging didn't make sense to me. So, you know, maybe it was a little more rigid in my mind, my structure at that time.
Yeah. I mean, that's I think what a lot of like traditional race car drivers struggle with, right? Because it's a judged event, which is very rare for motorsports.
Yeah.
And you're not the winning and losing is not, you know, by the second or the millisecond, right? It's very subjective. So that's probably why you didn't really,
it didn't quite call to me, but it was very neat to see the car control. And I'll be honest with you, when I was at that age, I looked at that car control and my dad and my brother had it and I thought there's no way that I'll ever be able to do that. Like there's no, and I stayed away from like rallying and that sort of stuff. I focused on desert racing and thanks to Mr. Zaplicki, you know, basically rallying program fell in my lap. Yeah. And it was quick. It was kind of surprising to me how quickly all of a sudden it was like, oh wow, no, I can do that. Yeah. You know, it was just seat time and the right setups and then having my brother built my first rally car for me. And then having my dad involved was really special because he had so much rallying experience. You know, he would come along and just this stuff that you wouldn't think of. He'd look at my tires and be like, well, you're obviously turning better right than left. And I would be like, how can you tell? Well, he's look at the tire wear, you know? And it's like, you'd never look for tire wear like that. And so I realized, I'm like, yeah, that A-pillar's out way further out here and it's blocking my vision. So I'm sliding the car more one direction than the other to try to look around it. So it was like, well, you're scrubbing speed if you're going sideways. So, no, you know, there was many years that having, you know, a family of racing was, I didn't deem it as a positive because I always felt like I was stuck in their shadows. Right. And that took me a long time to realize that it was really a shadow that I cast upon myself. And then once I kind of stepped sideways and realized, then I grew a lot more. And you know, having all of those people around you, you know, you don't really realize the professionalism that it instills in you at a young age, you know, whether it was my dad racing for PPI or being involved with companies like Toyota or Hyundai, Mazda, you know, it was like you didn't realize what it impressed on you, but it really did. Yeah. How many times did you go to Pikes Peak, for example, to watch your dad? I think it's easier to classify the years that I didn't go. Because I would say about 10, I was about 10-ish and I decided I didn't want to go for 1994, which was the year my dad set the record, which always bothered me afterwards. But, you know, I was a tough one as a kid, you know, you'd be up in the mountains at 3 or 4 in the morning and I'd be freezing and you'd be bored. And, you know, it was like, you can only throw rocks for so long, you know? But no, Pikes Peak's very special. Like, you know, it was always a blast for me when we would finish the day and, you know, you're just around all the guys. They'd pull the Celica or the Tacoma, they'd pull them completely down every single day. You know, gearboxes and suspensions and everything. And you know, that to me just was normal. So I never really realized that was way above on preparation compared to anyone else. So I'd be out riding my bikes and messing around and playing with fireworks or something, you know, because it was always around 4th of July. But no, it was a really special time being able to do that.
Did you get into wrenching and into engineering part of building the car apart as well?
Yeah. So, you know, it's kind of, you know, my dad really was very involved with a lot of his race cars. So, you know, he had his own company called Millen Works, and that was something that, again, you know, I fell into working there, which was basically, when he sold it, it was 120-ish employees. And a large portion of it was engineering firm, really. And we did rapid prototyping and we did theme park rides, military vehicles, race cars started to taper off towards the end, but a really, really talented group of people. So we had electrical department, so you know we could build full vehicles, and test and develop, and we had dynos and shock dynos and rolling dynos and all sorts of neat stuff. So, you know, you couldn't help but be, you know, again around it. Like, yeah, of course, you started wrenching and learning and playing with stuff and trying to understand, like, you know, how systems worked and you know, it's just kind of fed me into where I am now. You know, now I'm maintaining customers' race cars, and we're looking at modifying, potentially, hopefully building our own race car at some point. You know, it's all just that continual growth that I'm just having so much fun with.
Yeah. So you said the Toyota deal, Paul
Zaplicki.
Yeah. He didn't say his last name when he introduced me at the event. So, Paul, if you're watching, How did that happen? Because you sort of like got a Toyota rally deal out of nowhere, it looked like, you right?
Yeah, so we basically started in '06 with FJ Cruiser, which FJ Cruiser was just announced, and it was basically Paul was looking at it as a passing of the torch, FJ40 to now FJ Cruiser. So he chose my dad and I to race this FJ Cruiser in the Baja 1000. And then along the story, they decided that it would be a really cool angle to add in like a privateer, a Joe's team. So it became this pros versus Joe's, which was really cool. At the end of it, at the time, we thought they were just going to hire another race team and we were racing against them, but they ended up being very amateur, and you got to see the two versions in a TV show called Two Roads to Baja. And so that was kind of my first time with Toyota and marketing and seeing how they worked. And Paul really kind of like shaped my idea of marketing, because he basically looked at what we were doing, in traditional racing with, basically racing moon buggies and off-road that had no correlation to the vehicles, and brought stock vehicles back into kind of the picture, and we raced them and modified them where we could within the rules, and also it was, again, a really, really fun era.
So what was what did you learn about marketing from these experiences?
I think more than anything, it was seat time in front of cameras. It was a lot of that sort of stuff. And then kind of understanding, it was an interesting time because this was kind of pre the big recession in '08. So back then, it was a lot easier to find sponsorship dollars, easy to find product deals. And then all of a sudden we get spit out on the other side, and it's like, whew, now this is challenging, and figuring out how to make different, business to business actions kind of work, and how can we promote products but do it subtly, or how can we do it authentically? So Paul really taught me a lot with all of that, and just kind of shaped to be where I'm at now, which is avoiding marketing if I can.
So what happened after the FJ deal?
FJ went along for a few years, and then I ended up actually racing for Porsche in the Trans-Siberia rally, which was really interesting. So we had stock Cayennes, and it went from Moscow to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. So it was a Dakar-style rally, but it wasn't part of FIA back then. So they only did it a couple years, but it was. That was wild, that one, for sure.
Right.
Racing through Russia, this is before we ever saw those dash cam footage through Russia.
Right.
We could barely make stage times because you were speeding on the highways trying to make it and getting pulled over by police officers. And it was the Wild West compared to now. But no, so that one kind of rolled into, from there, we Paul brought me back into Tundras with Baja 1000 in 2014 or so. And that kind of got the ball really. I kind of had a hiatus in there. There was a period there where it, racing kind of slowed down for me, and then it just took off again. And we did the Baja 1000 with the Tundra, and then it rolled into a multi-year rally program with the RAV4.
Right.
And that was super fun.
Yeah,
I'll be honest with you.
Yeah. The RAV4 was pretty major, wasn't it? It was all over there.
Yeah. It was a big program for us. It was pushing that vehicle that is just not considered a rally car into that world was so much fun. And seeing the pushback and people thinking you couldn't do it. And then, and it was a perfect vehicle. I still think to this day, rallying really should focus on SUVs and things in the U.S. market, because at the end of the day, nobody's buying, or not nobody, but people are not in the U.S. are not as interested in smaller vehicles. We like our bigger SUVs and things. So.
Right. People aren't buying.
No.
Yeah.
They're not quite buying Yaris's.
Yeah.
So.
And taking them, off-roading.
No. Yeah. And probably then there's a small amount of people that are taking RAV4s off-road, but it ignites that thought in people. So I started seeing lift kits coming along. People are lifting RAV4s, and you see some of that Subaru culture. They're doing the same with lift kits and sand ladders and rock rails and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So, it's amazing what you can do with a platform and then see where it grows.
Initially, when you guys announced that you're going to rally with a RAV4, was the response sort of like, what are you guys doing? kind of like that?
Yeah, sort of. You know, I mean, we kind of started very slow. We kind of stuck with California Rally Series for the first year and kind of dabbled to kind of understand and learn. And there was some learnings for me. My girlfriend, now wife at the time, was my co-driver, so there was a lot to learn. I knew how to write notes for the desert, but I really didn't know how to write rallying notes.
Okay.
Pace notes, let's call them. No, there was just, you know, we kind of learned and dabbled, and we tried to understand the vehicle, you know, because we were entering a class that is open. You know, in rallying, there's your four-wheel drive classes, and then there's your two-wheel drive, and your two-wheel drive is really just an open category. And if we'd chosen a four-wheel drive class, we really would have been outgunned. So we went two-wheel drive because at the end of the day, it's really challenging to put down more than 300 horsepower on a gravel stage. So, okay, front-wheel drive RAV4 was kind of the direction we wanted to go. And the class is open. So you can put gearboxes, you can put turbos, you can do all sorts of stuff. But because it was two-wheel drive, it limited, you know, how much power you could put down. So, you know, I'd learned from Paul that before, you know, if we can keep that story stock, then we can get more support from engineering within Toyota. We got support from their used group. So we basically funded it that way within Toyota. And we kept a stock engine, we kept a stock transmission, stock axles, stock. I think we changed brake pads and shocks. Yeah. I think that was the majority of it, which sometimes the brakes got a little spicy on the downhill stages. They were not adequate, but you learned how to drive around it. But, you know, the biggest thing that I was going after was reliability, knowing that Toyota's already done these thousands of hours of engineering. So, you know, maybe 10,000 hours, I don't know. But I knew that if I could drive the thing and wheel it and make it work, then, you know, we'd be reliable. And I kept watching people go to rallies and break. And it was like, you know,
too much.
You got to finish.
Yeah.
So, and at that time I didn't, you know, my dad had sold Millen Works, so I really didn't have this group around me anymore to be able to have that engineering support when the FJs were done at Millen Works. And so, you know, things like spring rates and that sort of stuff, we had engineers calculate that stuff for us and figure out what we wanted on those. So, you know, the RAV was way more like, well, does that work? Does that not work? You know, it's like we had to try it, and we didn't have that engineering support.
So where were you housing the team, and where was it getting maintained and stuff?
So my brother built the RAV4 at his shop in Huntington, and then my shop's just around the corner. So we maintained the program there. And at that time, you know, I really enjoyed developing race cars, and I think I got that from my dad. I didn't enjoy building them as much, but I really enjoyed maintaining and developing and trying and finding speed. And that was so much fun.
And how about the chassis, though? Did you, obviously you enforced the body, you had a roll cage and all those things, but you gutted everything and then you...
Yeah. For the most part, it was trying to get weight out of it because it was 3,500 pounds. So it was kind of like within the rules, how much could we, you know, so there was a lot of lightning doors, and we went to fiberglass shells on things. And, you know, it was kind of just trying to find everything we could. We would modify control arms to try to get more camber, caster, whatever we were after out of them. But the cool part is the platform actually had a lot of wheel travel. Okay. So it started with a lot of wheel travel that we're easily able to get. Yeah. And so some of these rallies like Maine, that was a rough rally. So you'd see a lot of suspension failures and that sort of stuff. And that's where we were strong. Right. You know, it'd get rough, and it was like, all right.
Right. So the main components, the powertrain, the motor.
Yeah. ECU.
ECU was all from the factory.
Yeah. Yeah. It was factory intake, factory air filter, which wasn't so great for water crossings, but you know, it would suck in water from time to time. So we just carry a spare.
Yeah, but you could tell the difference between the reliability, right?
Yeah, that was the goal. Yeah. You know, and you know, it's a little bit part of the reason the class I race in now is spec trophy truck, where the engines, the transmissions are all spec. And we have a driveline that's made for a trophy truck that's got 1,100 horsepower, but we have 500 horsepower. So I just gravitate towards those classes, and I find it's where the drivers shine, sort of thing. And I love the fact that the vehicles are reliable. Like, we finish all these races, and it's just not fun sitting on the side of the road broken. So I kind of took that with me to rallying, and that was a goal.
Were there times when you couldn't finish these races?
No, we've always finished with, there's one FJ year I crashed. I crashed like 8 miles from the finish of a Baja 1000. I'd been throwing up, so my blood sugar was really low.
Is that the one that Sean was talking about?
No, it's actually a different one. It was probably the first time I threw up in a race car. But No, there's not been too many DNFs. Normally we carry the parts and fix it, and it's like, it's a little challenging, especially when you're in some of these unlimited classes. If you fall down that many hours trying to get back through the limited classes, it's just dangerous. But that's kind of part of getting a finish in one of these races, and I think that's the first goal.
Yeah. What was some of the most fun races that you did in the RAV4?
Oh, I always looked forward to Olympus. Olympus was always my favorite, and mostly because it was a WRC round in the 80s, and just those roads are really special and they're really fun. And then you'd always find those little bits and pieces of every rally that had some amazing stages. We'd have like what people don't realize in the U.S. is we have stages that are just as good as any of the WRC stuff. They're beautiful stages and they're beautiful roads with cambers. And I mean, we don't have any New Zealand roads, but right. We have some great roads. So New Zealand's definitely the pinnacle. But no, there's parts of, I've already forgotten your question, but there's parts of
RAV4. Yeah. The most fun in the RAV4.
It's just obviously being a production vehicle, the most fun was any downhill stage. We had one, I think, in Prescott that was, I forget what the elevation drop is over the miles, but it would cook the brakes, and it was like you had a 4-wheel-drive car. Right. Like you had power. It was fun. But no, I always enjoyed too when people would whine about dust factors, and they'd try to get, and they figured out after a while. They'd come to me and be like, "What do you think? Should we talk to these guys and ask for a dust factor?" And they figured out real fast. So I was like, "No," because I was comfortable with the dust. So,
what was it like having partnering with your wife or then girlfriend? I mean, did that?
I think it only strengthened our relationship. There were some areas that I lacked. She really adapted to me. I didn't describe the road as well as I could have, and she adapted and she learned where I was thinking and looking.
So were you guys swapping, like one driving and one?
No, just I drove and just she co-drove. Okay. But she. It's funny, when we look back, I ended up having Rhiannon Gelsomino, who's Travis Pastrana's co-driver now. She co-drove with me in the last year, and she brought a ton of experience, and she really elevated my notes. But we still had some stages that Christina and I were still, faster. So it was dangerous, I think, but she brought a lot of safety to it. And a lot of stages we were faster, but it really taught me how to do it properly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Did you... do you go back to New Zealand often? And have you ever raced in New Zealand?
Yeah. Well, when was the last? We've been, it's because of COVID, we haven't gone down since 2020. We actually were there like in March, right before lockdowns. But my kids are young, so they were 6 months and 2.5 or something like that. So we haven't gone down, but we're planning. We have flights booked in a few months. We'll go down this summer, their winter. But I did a bit of the last one, I don't know if it was Taupo 1000 but I did a lot of road racing down there. I did all the Formula Ford Winter Cup Series and the New Zealand Grand Prix, and it is a neat experience, neat country, and I'm a citizen as well, thanks to my dad, dual citizen, and love going to New Zealand. So they have a huge motorsports culture, as you know. Yeah. And a lot of great racetracks, and it was an awesome place to really cut my teeth after go-karts. Doing all that stuff, and I look back on it really fondly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Content. Okay, so what are your thoughts on social media and how this whole landscape of motorsports and social media is evolving these days?
Well, I think it's really neat that for us in Terrible Herbst we have live footage, so you can come and watch our races and ride along with us for a 20-hour race, which I think is, pretty neat. And then on the flip side, it does feel like a job sometimes, trying to be social and tell everyone about yourself. And I'm a little more reserved and a little quieter. But it's neat. I've done vlogs in the past, and it's neat getting the feedback of people, liking them or what they wanted different or what, it still blows me away when I do put up onboard footage for my races. I'll put up a whole one, and the amount of people that, the average view will be an hour. Yeah. It's like, wow, you guys are watching this? But, and I probably could do a better job of it because there's so much that's going on that the camera can't pick up. In the last one I got stuck, and you can't see how I got stuck or why I got stuck. You just see me get stuck. It's like, well, there's a Class 1 car there, and there's another spec truck there, and we're fighting for, spec truck and I are fighting for the lead, and but you know, it's part of the game. You know, it's social media is super important. You know, it's a little bit of a balancing act with kids. I don't know if I'm going to let them have it, you know, but it is definitely something that if you're creating a product, then I understand. But it's neat to see how much we can share now. And you have to be somewhat careful. I know a lot of my onboards really helped some of the other guys that I raced against really bring them up to speed. Like they realized what I was doing. And it was, you know, as I was trying to get further in these unlimited, you know, spec and trophy truck, I needed to showcase my skills, and it was a great way to showcase with onboards and showing that I was reliable and not necessarily crashing people's vehicles was super important. So, you know, it's a double-edged sword, I guess you could say. It's good and bad. In
the times when your dad was competing, he didn't have to worry about any of this stuff, right?
No.
Do you think it's easier now or it's harder now?
You know, I think they had a golden era, and obviously it's easy to say that now, but I mean, there was one year my dad did Pikes Peak with Hyundai, Mickey Thompson with Toyota, and Mazda Asia Pacific Rally Championship with Mazda. You know, I'm like, wow, that was a full schedule. I don't know how many rallies that was, but I mean, I just don't know if you could do that this day and age, you know, with social media and everything. But there were a lot of opportunities that they had, and my dad worked hard for them, and he made them happen. So, you know, I think, what were those two? The Pikes Peak car and the Mazda, he was building those cars and running those programs. So just the Mickey Thompson he was driving. But cool to see. That was a very neat era.
Yeah. When Jeff Swart was here, he was telling us how your dad got him into rally racing, right?
Yeah. We spent many of Thanksgivings at Jeff's house doing lots of fun stuff.
So what are you competing in now? So you're done with the RAV4s, right?
Yes.
So you're
rallying kind of wrapped up, and I really put a focus on racing trophy trucks, and that was my goal. And I started racing with Terrible Herbst Motorsports, I want to say in 2018, I believe it was. So I've been racing with them and a few other people, and they build their own race cars. So I raced with some of their clients. So just kind of, you know, I mean, we're the last few years, I think I do 5 to 6 races with them. I do just about their full calendar. And I'll race with, I'm racing with EJ Herbst. And so he and I split the races. You know, this last race I qualified and started, and he will do the Baja 500. He'll qualify and start, and I'll finish. And we're in spec trophy truck. And it's a blast, you know? Yeah. It's a spec trophy truck's a tough class, because we really are really low horsepower for a 6,000 pound vehicle. We're like 350-ish horsepower. So it's like spec Miata racing is kind of the joke. You know, it's full throttle everywhere.
Right. We're
ramming through ditches, and you're trying to just blitz through rocks and try to not get flat tires. And it's a neat class. I enjoy it when I get to race the premier class. Like trophy trucks are pretty special too, when you get 1,100 horsepower. Which is a lot. It's a lot, but you sometimes you ask for more in the sand washes. You wouldn't hurt if you had a bit more. But the spec class is really tough, because they traditionally class 1, which is an open wheeled buggy, which is an open class, and in the past, class 1s have won overall Baja 1000s and everything. The class 1 cars are not quite as strong as a spec trophy truck, so their drive lines they can hurt with their transaxles and their axles and all that stuff. So they play more of a chess match. They race each other, but they start in front of us. So they're racing each other. They're watching, you know, what pace they're doing. If they're up a few minutes, then they'll slow down and manage it. But we're like all out sprinting.
Right.
So we got to try to get through those guys.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a super challenge of because they go fast enough, you know, on straightaways they can do 140 mile an hour where we're doing 100. And so the technical stuff, we got to blitz them and run. So we end up doing these races like a Baja 500. We'll do 8 hours of in the dust. Yeah. Like we are fighting tooth and nail, and you know, getting a flat tire, and the guy goes by you, and then he'll flat or something, and you go by, and it's super rewarding. Like it's just like I don't know what to say, but it's one of those forms of motorsports that like it's never easy, and it never comes to you. And you do get perfect days, and it's like, it's kind of weird. you're like, well, how did that all go together so well? And then you get most races, you step on your, you stub your toe.
Yeah.
So last race I got stuck on a cattle guard with 2 other cars, like we're in second,
Right.
and there's first, and there's a class 1 car, and it's like, and then, because we're stuck in this gate. And we couldn't, and the guys just blasted through this gate. This farmer closed this gate and fortified it, and we couldn't get by. So it's just like wild. You never know what you're getting into, you know? And some days we have fog and rain, and some days it's just super still. And there's just, the dust just hangs.
Right.
The last 1,000, we had a storm that day. So we're raining in the morning. So we're, and then in the afternoon, it's just, wind was like 20, 30 mile an hour wind. So it was amazing because you could actually run up on each other because no dust. It's always different. And understanding the time gaps between each other and understanding kind of the chess match of, I might just, some of the guys are on tires that are just not as good. And so we'll go through these summits and rocky stuff, and we call it stinking it up. And they'll just go up that at 80%, and we just can't get to them. Yeah. And they'll stack us all up. Right. And then they'll take off, and then we're all on top of each other, clambering. And, so there's strategy to it. Yeah. And how you play it. And then there's the Mexicans that are, right on the side of the course, and they're, parked at, you might have this amazing line, and they've got their vehicles and blue tents parked on it. So you're like, oh, we can't use that. And you don't know until you get there. Yeah. Or I've had quads crash in front of me, and, it's mayhem, and it literally feels like going to war on every one of these starts. Like, I'm good at the starts, but I don't like the starts. Like, so.
Well, now we have a live feed from every car now, right? Yeah,
yes, which is good and bad because, I mean, you have an issue or something like that, and you're stopped, and if you forget, the cameras are rolling, and the audio's picking it up, and you're like, man, I want to say what I feel, but you can't because people are watching. Yeah, and that's tough. Yeah. But it is also cool because there's been races where my wife's given us splits. Mm-hmm. She'll text us in a speed zone. Right. We're sitting there on the limiter going ba 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 ba, and my co-driver will be like, oh, okay, we got this guy and this guy ahead of us. It's like, okay, cool. So. That's pretty neat because we have Starlinks and we have, internet basically. Yeah. So she's amazing. Yeah. She can see my location at all times. Right. So it takes away that, and not danger factor, but before I used to have my own personal trackers, and I'd be able to send her a message because you roll these things over and all of a sudden you lose everything. Right. So I still have some backups, but you are, in rallying's much better than desert racing. You're your own first responder. So when I was racing the RAV4, the car was slow enough, I could see tracks go off, and you could, I've come across people stuck in trees and partially on fire, and co-drivers broken hips, or I've had guys upside down in ditches and they can't get out. Right. Rallying very much stresses the fact that you guys are your first responders. Yeah. So it's really cool the way they do that safety net with the radio blocks and everything. Mm-hmm. Desert racing's a lot more Wild West. So, as soon as we got stuck in the last race, it was like,
you're still your first responder though.
You are, and there's some guys that are much better than others. Mm-hmm. So it's just one of those things that the biggest thing I worry about is being out of the vehicle. So you get stuck, and it's like, ooh, you don't want to get squished with the dust. We get stuck in a silt area, so it's super dusty. It's fine dust. It's up in the air, and everyone's trying to get unstuck, so they're shooting dirt everywhere. Yeah. So you have to be really careful on that. But I was just going to say my co-driver, Erica Sachs, because I seem to gravitate towards female co-drivers, which I don't know if it's just because I like being told what to do or what. But Erica's super experienced, and she does her own, like Rhiannon, she trains people on how to use these GPSs, and she's very skilled at off-road racing. And it was neat for us because we've just started, this will be our first year at the Baja 500 working together, and she was quick to yell at me not to get out when we got stuck. Mm-hmm. And I was like stoked on that because I'm like, I know that because you set, it was 5 seconds later, it's like, wham, somebody hits us. Mm-hmm. So I was like, yeah, no, I know. But there's some safety in that because now I know somebody else is stuck on us. Right. So now, I'm not going to get squished. So, but I still jump around on top of the vehicles. I don't get in between them. Yeah. But
so that's the biggest danger. If you're outside the vehicle.
And dust is a tough one because the spec class 2 has a lot of young guys, 20-year-old guys that maybe don't know any better just yet, and they race really hard in the dust, and we have to make passes because if you're not passing, you're getting pushed backwards. Yeah. So, we see accidents, they happen, and they get, they're not as bad as, say, like you see on those freeway ones in fog, but it's the same principle. Like, you take as much risk as you're comfortable. And as I'm getting older, I'm noticing the risk factors coming down a little less. I'm maybe not as interested in running in the dust, but you ask Erica, she'll say the opposite. So,
Really? So what's the, like, I'm sure there's a lot of like technology, like innovation happening in off-road racing. What are some of the big innovations that you've seen or that you're sort of seeing right now?
I think I'm projecting the big ones. We're starting to see active dampers. You know, we're pretty far behind in off-road racing, but we have seen the introduction of four-wheel drive. You know, there was a lot of challenges a few years ago in getting the reliability out of the four-wheel drive. You know, our biggest challenge, and I'll get a little too technical, I'm sure, but our biggest challenge is we have big tires. We have 130 to 140 pound tires. And so that makes a requirement on our suspension to be heavy, which to get the vehicles to be stable, you need a sprung versus unsprung mass that is really critical. And you need a chassis that's heavy to make the chassis stable because you have such a heavy wheel and tire. So they fight each other. So these four-wheel drives were struggling with reliability until they started making them heavier, and, you know, they've upped their drive lines. And then when they started adding more power, and so we're now out of the mid 80s WRC era. So we're now into four-wheel drives, and now we're starting to deal with active dampers. So Fox for us has started introducing their live valve, but I mean we're scratching the surface. We're seeing the benefits, but there's a whole world there that you know, I'm sure we'll start getting into active diffs and. It's just, it's an interesting side because desert racing hasn't had manufacturers in so long. You know, 90s, early 2000s, the last time we had manufacturers. So it's really just been gentleman racing and how much dollars they want to put into it. And so, you know, going the four-wheel drive route, I know is starting to stress a lot of people. It's making the prep costs, you know, guys were doing 6 races before, now they're just doing the 4 Mexico races.
Well, these trophy trucks are super expensive too.
Yeah, and maintaining them. They're, you know, they're $1 million plus vehicles. Which is a lot, but that's the cheap part. You know, the infrastructure that goes with it, the chase trucks, the trailers, the pre-runners. People are pre-running in race cars now. So it's definitely just grown and grown and grown and grown. So this, you know, the challenge of meeting everyone else's, you know, what they're doing is like it's financially challenging as well as, you know, talent-wise. Like it's a lot to. We used to pre-run, you know, in slower vehicles, and we marked the course and this and that, and you'd come to a section and you'd be like, I think I could do this in the race car. I could maybe jump this or whatever, and you might try it or you might not. You might know the next 500, I could try jumping that, or, you know, now it's like, no, guys are checking that on Monday. They know, hey, I can jump this and, you know, I can time this and it's cool. It's definitely, you know, it went from kind of a game, you know, it's just still a chess match, but it's gone to a sprint. It's, you know, your Baja 1000s and stuff. You get a lot of attrition in the trophy truck, but like our spec stuff, I mean, our last one, I think it was I forget how long my section was, 8 hours or 400 miles, something like that. I sprinted the whole way. Like I never, which we would just kind of get into 80%. Yeah. And you would just kind of cruise and this and that, and it was sprinting like the whole way. But we, you know, Kyle Jurgensen and I both checked out, and we were trying to put this gap on everyone, and we could because the wind was there, and we were able to just run. Yeah. So it's neat to get to do, hard to rate pace notes for 400 miles. Yeah. You know, when a traditional rally was 120 stage miles, but we do a lot of stages twice. So you're really only writing notes for 60 miles. So that's why I've had a few people ask me like, well, can you do a better job of your notes? And you're like, it's a lot of work to do 400 miles. Yeah. Because you got to do it 2 or 3 passes. Right. So I'm starting to think that as we go, we see a lot of guys doing the Baja 500 solo. I think we're going to start getting into this era of 2 drivers and sprinting. Because we're starting to sprint now, and I really don't think that maybe some of the younger guys can do it, but I know fresh drivers are going to be faster. Yeah, yeah. It's like an endurance racing too. You know, back in the day, it used to be endurance racing. Yeah. Now it's now it's a sprint. Yes. Yeah, it's just a long sprint. Right? Exactly. Yeah. It's a very long sprint. Yeah. And that's what's cool about racing. You push and push and push. But I'd see, you know, we have the architectures figured out of trophy trucks. They're very weird. Like, you know, I know the Europeans, the Dakar guys look at us and think, what are you doing? You know, we carry 100 gallons to 120 gallons of fuel, and we put it behind the axle. Like, why would you put it back there? You know, it's like, we don't want these vehicles to change direction. So, you know, we want 6,000 pound vehicles. want wide vehicles. We want low, stable, because they have to go through these bumps and get shot around. And we want overbuilt things because we make ditches and we make mistakes and we run into ditches, in the dust. Like we do get flat tires, and I don't drive on them, but some people do.
So what's the biggest difference between the Dakar racing and the desert racing that's happening here in North America?
Well, I would say, a Dakar distance is what, 4,000 or 5,000 miles or something like that, where you take a Baja 1000 is at most 1,200 to 1,400 miles. Our roads are rough because we have been using them traditionally now for 50 plus years, 60 years. We've been using the same, pretty much, not all the same roads, but, a lot of existing roads, and roads are getting a little more challenging to get in Baja. So we don't race on roads as much as we race on trails. There'll be a road that we used to race on, and now we're up on the side hilling, and it's rough. So our roads are getting rougher. People pre-run, they get rougher. There's a lot of bumps that are at the frequency of our suspension. So, that's kind of our goal, is to get them to work at that frequency. I'm off. I lost you.
And Dakar is more.
Oh, yes, Dakar.
Like just going, like, they don't have trails, right?
No,
they're just driving like on a desert.
Yes,
right?
they have open navigation, which is very tricky on its own. I learned that in Trans-Siberia. It's very, very tricky. So their vehicles need to change direction better. And then they need to encompass a lot different terrain than us. When they spend a lot more time in dunes, we don't spend time in dunes.
Right.
We spend time on traditional trails and roads.
Right.
We have virtual checkpoints that really keep us on a track sort of thing. We do deviate. We're allowed to. We're allowed to race from VCP to VCP. Yeah. But it's kind of a no-no. I don't like bushwhacking, which is basically just driving on virgin dirt, I would call it. It's not advisable. And our terrains, well, you don't know where the ditches are, and you don't know where rocks are, and sometimes, a bush will grow around a rock, a big old boulder or something. So, we don't quite have that luxury of exploring as much as, say, like a Dakar would. And then Dakar's blind. Yeah. Their stages they don't know where they're going. Yeah. They don't know where the next checkpoint is.
Sure. They're just like looking at the compass and going in a general direction, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so our vehicles are very specialized for our world, and that's why we have 2 tires, and they're huge, and they sit off the back, and it's all for stability because our roads are rough from us, pre-running and racing, where their roads are non-existent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not literally compass, but like GPS directional, right?
Yeah.
They're not going on a trail. Yeah.
And I've got to spend some time, in the last few years, I've started kind of mentoring more. And I got to spend some time with Austin Jones as he went over there and won his class. I think it was T3 in the Can-Am. Seeing what they do and seeing his mindset, it's a lot more, he has to be a lot more fluid and relaxed, and it's just driving on where the navigator tells you where to go. So, they have a lot more, they have a chess game as well. Like, basically if you've done well the first few stages, you don't necessarily want to lead. You want to let others lead. And so they have a lot of that back and forth game where we're a little more sprinting.
So in off-road world, I heard there was some meeting recently about like all the minds getting together and sort of like
I did hear about that.
Consolidating everything, or like sort of getting on a schedule so folks don't have to jump all around.
Yes.
What is going on in the off-road world right now?
We have a lot of wonderful organizers that do a great job, and they're all kind of, they've got enough racers to hold races and be profitable, but I don't know if it's serving the off-road world in general. Like, we have a really robust, score international with Mexico, but our U.S. has kind of gotten fragmented, with Best in the Desert kind of stumbling a little bit recently. So, there's King of the Hammers with Dave Cole, and then there's Legacy and Best in the Desert, Snore,
the Mint, right?
Yeah, the Martelli brothers.
That's a different one again.
It's one of the I think most positive things about desert racing, but it's probably the worst part, is that we don't have an FIA. Yeah. We don't have a sanctioning body. We have promoters that are sanctioning bodies at the same time. Right. So I always laugh, like, it's like, well, did you pay your entry fee? And you're like, well, yeah, but so, there's been some tough stuff in the past, there's not been rules followed and people getting away with doing cheater motors. And, it's definitely like, it's a Wild West, but thankfully we have the desert kind of checks everyone. It's you got to beat the desert first. So if you do cheat, it's not necessarily meaning you're going to win. But yeah, there's I it's way above my pay grade, let's say. But at this point, it would be really neat to have a robust U.S. racing series, because the U.S. racing is way different than Mexican racing. And Mexican racing is dangerous. Yeah, it really is. It's the most fun because we race virtual checkpoint to virtual checkpoint. It's the most challenging because we have soap beds. We race on the beach. We race over mountains, where U.S. racing is raced primarily in the desert of Nevada and Arizona and California. And those tracks are pretty consistent. They don't change a lot. A Mint 400 these days is very consistent. A Parker 400 is very consistent, and but they're pretty fun though. It's surprising. Like even though it's the same racetrack over and over, it's still fun. Like they're still challenging to get them to survive. They're normally very rough in the U.S. Mexico was considered the smoother one, but now it's getting there. But it'd be neat if we can get them all together, because we have some wonderful promoters. Martelli brothers do a great job of promoting. Dave Cole does a wonderful job of promoting. He brings us basically Burning Man for off-road racing with King of the Hammers. King of the Hammers is getting bigger and bigger every year. It's a cool event. Like if you haven't checked it out, I know you have, but a lot of people, it's a neat event to go out to, and it's all walks of life and all the different worlds of people that are in off-roading. So it's super cool to see. But you've got to get, for us, the racers are focusing on Mexico. The really hardcore enthusiasts, the really professional teams are racing in Mexico. But it's 4 races a year, which, as a family man with a young family, I don't mind only 4 races a year. But there's a lot of time committed to that. Even a 250 mile race where EJ and I split and did 100 something miles each. We were there for 6 days. Because it requires that for pre-running, and pre-running is open for 2 weeks, which that's another conversation. Desert racing in general is still Wild West, and it's still like open. There aren't these rules. There's no cost caps. There's no, like it's crazy, it's good and bad. It is. But it's pretty, it's lawless in a way. And, we're not supposed to use our helicopters for communicating, but you hear it in people's team videos. And, it's like, there's a lot of stuff going on that's, but it's kind of what makes it neat, because it's an adventure as well. So it's if you regulate it too much, then it becomes like you're right. Exactly. Like
it's just the right amount of fairness.
If we had an FIA, we would be racing spec trophy trucks. We'd have 500 horsepower, not 11 horsepower. But we already have 40 entries. We'd probably have 50, 60 entries. It would be really cool. But, and unfortunately, I think and I love 4-wheel drive, but desert racing allowing or going to 4-wheel drive has kind of shot themselves in the foot because their entries are going lower. And this is the first year that Scores announced separate classes. So now they have 4 trophy truck classes. They have a 4-wheel drive, a 2-wheel drive, a Legends or for drivers over 50, and now a spec trophy truck. So it kind of, they still get 50 vehicles, but they're spread out, and they're, it's starting to get a little murky with the waters. And so, it'd be neat if in a way, it would be neat if you had a governing body that could tighten it all up. And, but no, it is special in its own way.
Well, it looks like you're having a blast, though. Whatever you're doing, it
I have a lot of passion
for
it. I do have a lot of passion for it.
All right. Let's move on to our next section. This is called the Creative Drive Rapid Fire section. Usually I start with turbo NA, but in your case, I'm going to start with 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive.
Yes. I like 2-wheel drive. I think it's a challenging class. I think it's fun to drive. I think 4-wheel drive is a little too easy to drive.
All right. Dirt or tarmac?
Dirt. Always dirt.
Most underrated platform for off-road?
Underrated platform? I don't know. I mean, we have so many. That one's a tough one. I think all the UTV stuff. I think the UTVs, those Polaris Pro Rs and stuff, those guys are really starting to... I'm noticing we finish these races and they're not far behind us. They're 5 or mile an hour average slower than us. They're not like a 250 mile race. They're 15 or 20 minutes behind us. And it's like, I get out of the car and I'm like, and there they go. And it's like, whoa, I barely got my helmet off, dude. Like, and we're pushing. So, really looking forward to seeing where those vehicles go in 10 years time.
Nice. Your favorite rally car?
Oh, I would say it would probably be one of my dad's old rally cars, because he puts on his festival, Leadfoot Festival in New Zealand, and I got to drive some of his RX-7s, or His RX-7, his one is his 4-wheel drive one from the 80s is really cool, but he has a Resto mod RX-3. That's a modern day built 2-wheel drive RX-3, and it would be the RX-3. That's a neat vehicle.
Dream race you haven't run yet?
Oh, Dakar.
Dumbest excuse you've heard after a crash?
Blaming the co-driver. Normally, it's always the co-driver's fault.
Of course. What's the weirdest mod you've seen on a rally car?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, yeah. Most people follow in line. Nothing too crazy. I can't think of anything, honestly.
All right. If you weren't a driver, what job would you have?
Oh, I'd love to be a vehicle builder, and that's where I'm slowly transitioning into. It's neat being able to do all that stuff and see where the time is and have theories and figure them out.
Theme song of your racing career?
Oh, I don't know. I like all music. That one's a tough one to narrow down. I'd probably come up with something that would offend somebody, so I'll probably skip that one.
All right. Who would play you in a movie?
Oh, I don't know. I'm getting older, so I'm definitely not as up to date with movies and things, but I don't know.
Your brother?
Yeah, maybe.
Do you stunt drive?
I do. Yes, I do.
Well?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
You do that
as
well, huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've done that for a while now.
All right.
Not as much as my brother. My brother works way more than me.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks. So let's talk a little bit about the future here. So where do you see yourself in, 5 years? More racing, more building? Where are you heading?
Yeah, hopefully. Obviously, I think the neat part about desert racing is, I definitely have felt myself hit my prime a couple years ago, and we're kind of cresting over now. My vision's still really good. But, the passion for it, you can see, I think I got another 10 years of desert racing in me, but I think I've got at least another 20 years of race car development. I still see a huge area for improvement with these dampers.
Right.
So that's kind of what's driving me these days, and that'll be
More development
yeah,
stuff? Yeah.
I can see us going that direction, and I can see these vehicles.
Is there a manufacturer that you work with in particular?
Our team's sponsored by Fox, and they've kind of opened my eyes a little bit, but Millenworks had a lot of creative patents and things that worked really well with the military vehicles that I'd like to start applying that
cool.
into our world. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So where's your shop right now?
It's in Huntington Beach. It's right around the corner from Rhys's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're right down the street from us.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah. And so we maintain Terrible Herbst. We have their Truggy, which is the old Land Shark, which is, I forget how many times it won the Baja 1000, but that's a historic vehicle that we restored from, it burned a couple years ago. And then we have a few customer vehicles.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's your day job then?
Yeah, that's my day job.
Okay.
And it's slowly
Awesome.
kicking all of my stuff out of the shop.
Okay.
So those trophy trucks take up a lot of space. They're huge.
Yeah, those things are huge, right?
They are, and all the parts come off of them.
Right. Yeah. All right. So we are jumping into the final segment here. It's called Who's Boosting It Right Now. Okay.
Yeah.
We're shining light on some of the creators and brands that are killing it. So creator, who's killing it right now?
For desert racing?
Or anything.
Yeah.
Like you're following on Instagram or on YouTube and you feel like, man, this guy's really doing a good job.
Yeah, I'm going to probably jump out of my off-road world here, but
that's fine.
No, probably not. I don't know. I'm getting in my old man era. I've picked up bird hunting. I've got a bird hunting dog, and that's been my he's been my driving force recently to get into something totally outside of racing. But no, there's so many brands in off-road, doing a great job, but it's definitely starting to feel a little stale. So it's kind of like we're all following each other. So where are we going to start to jump out? I call our trophy truck class a spec Mason class. They all have the same chassis, and so we'll see in time. There's
some speaking of hunting, there's some awesome hunting channels on YouTube. Have you seen?
Yes.
There is. I was just get stuck on this guy for 20 minutes just stalking a deer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm just getting older or what, but I'm
I love watching that
the idea
stuff,
of going for a hike in the hills and
it's
chasing
5
birds.
minutes of him just sitting here whispering into this scope. Right?
Well, and part of me is doing all this racing we've done in Nevada and everything. I'm starting to rethink of all these places and be like, oh, that could be a perfect habitat, or so.
How about brands that are boosting it right now?
Oh, I'd say Polaris is doing a really good job with what they're doing. They're definitely really showcasing their vehicles, and now they've decided to do a, you know, and I have no affiliation with them, but they sell their race cars, you know, their factory cars, and you know, I'm in this desert world watching all these other trophy truck manufacturers, and you're kind of like, you know, we're not Ferraris, but we're all car manufacturers, so we got to think like one. And how do we sell 4 or 5 trophy trucks a year? How do we do this with factory teams and works cars? And it's like, you know, there's just so much. Desert racing is it's behind, but it's like you can look back at the 80s and 90s and see where we're going to be in 10 years, sort of thing. Yeah. So no, Polaris doing a great job. You know,
there's a lot of room for improvement, huh?
I think so. Yeah, we're still a very small niche.
Or an advancement, I should say. Yeah,
we're still very much a niche. But as mainstream America is starting to figure us out and get more involved, you know, these UTVs are bringing in people that, you know, it becomes a stepping stone. And then all of a sudden they're buying trophy trucks and they're racing. And, you know, it's pretty cool to see us grow like that. We're getting a lot of IMSA guys, like a Mike Marshall's come our way. And, you know, seeing people that are looking for a new adventurous form of racing after they've finished their tin top racing and everything. So now it's really cool.
Cool. Event. Which event is boosting it right now?
Well, you know, your King of the Hammers and that sort of stuff are really cool races to go. They're very neat events, not fun races. So, you know, my passion is the Baja 1000. That's the one, you know, I've gotten a class win, but it's the one that every year you work for. You work all year for that one. But, you know, as far as, you know, your Martellis and your Dave Coles with King of Hammers, they do such a good job of promoting. You know, Score's trying. They're doing a better job for sure. They have some live shows and this and that. But, you know, I think for us, it's bringing the story to the people. Like, we all love the at the end of the day, like, we call it car porn. But, you know, the trucks bouncing and, you know, skipping across whoops, and it's amazing to see. But it's like, we want to see the story. So how can we tell the story, I think, is what's so important with getting desert racing out there.
Yeah, and with social media and with the live streams, it's getting easier and easier. Yeah. All right.
It is
Ryan?
It's getting easier, but it's getting tougher to get people's attention.
True. True. It is. It's just so much out there right now, right?
There is, yeah.
And last but not least, we ask all of our guests, what is your creative drive?
I think I had it nailed a few seconds ago when you asked me before, a couple of minutes, 20, 30 minutes ago. But, my creative drive is, desert racing is just that sport that it just never comes easy. So it's like that constant tinkering and that constant thinking and that constant work. And it never gets old. The pre-running never really gets old. The being down there and exploring and finding new roads. And it just feels like being at home. It's just fun.
Where can people find you online?
Mostly on Instagram, I guess, and my YouTube channel will be Ryan_Millen_. Typically where you can find me.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, thanks for coming to the Creative Drive. Yeah, I love this information that you had, and I enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a blast.
Thanks for watching and listening to The Creative Drive, where we offer listeners a candid look into the minds of automotive creators and their journeys. The Creative Drive is available on all podcast platforms, and we have more awesome guests lined up for you guys, so please subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. If you're interested in partnering with us, or if you have any feedback, please email us at podcast@racer.com or DM us in our Instagram. The Creative Drive is produced by Molly Binks from Racer Studio, directed by TJ Keon, creative director George Tamayo, and edited by Andrew Snyder. We've got New Nick, OG Nick, and Morgan on the socials. I'm your host, Taro Koki. Thanks for watching again, and we'll see you next time.